The autumn morning in Portland carried the fresh scent of fallen leaves as antique appraiser Sarah Mitchell stepped into the Victorian home on Elm Street. The Whitmore estate sale had drawn collectors from across New England. Sarah's trained eye immediately focused on a small collection of photographs displayed on an ornate mahogany table. Among the sepia-toned portraits and family pictures, one photograph caught her attention. It was a formal studio portrait from 1914 featuring a well-dressed family of four, a stern-looking father in a dark suit, a woman in an elegant white blouse with her hair pinned in the Gibson Girl style, and two young children, a boy of maybe 8 and a girl no older than 5. The photograph had the embossed mark of Hartwell Studios, Boston, showing it was taken at one of the city's most famous photography establishments. The family looked wealthy, their clothes suggesting upper-middle-class status during the pre-war era. Sarah lifted the silver frame, looking at the image more closely. The setup was typical of the period. The father standing behind his seated wife, children positioned formally beside them. Yet something about the mother's posture seemed strange. While the rest of the family looked straight at the camera with the expected serious expressions of the time, the woman's left hand was placed oddly, her fingers curved as if hiding something. "Interesting piece, isn't it?" came a voice from behind her. An elderly woman approached, introducing herself as Margaret Whitmore, the great-granddaughter of the home's original owners. "Do you know anything about this family?" Sarah asked, her professional curiosity piqued. Margaret shook her head. "That photograph came with some other items we inherited. I believe it belonged to a family named Patterson. Beyond that, I'm afraid I know nothing about their story." Sarah studied the image once more. That peculiar positioning of the mother's hand nagged at her instincts. Back in her downtown Portland office, Sarah placed the photograph under her professional magnifying equipment. Years of appraising antiques had taught her that the most valuable discoveries were often in the smallest details others missed. As she adjusted the focus and lighting, the image became surprisingly clear. The father's mustache was perfectly waxed, and the children's clothes were pressed and spotless. But it was the mother's hand that drew Sarah's full attention. Between the woman's fingers, barely visible in the original view, was the edge of something white. It looked like paper, a small piece carefully hidden, yet not completely hidden from the camera's lens. The way her fingers curved suggested she was holding it on purpose, perhaps hoping it would go unnoticed in the formal portrait. Sarah's heart beat faster. In her 15 years of appraising historical items, she had learned that people often hid important things in plain sight, especially during times of social trouble or personal crisis. The year 1914 was very important. It marked the start of World War I, a time when families across America faced uncertainty and hard choices. She took a picture of the detail with her high-resolution camera and improved the image on her computer. The white object became a bit clearer, looking like folded paper, though its contents remained a mystery. Sarah reached for her phone and called her colleague, Dr. James Reed, a historian specializing in early 20th century American social history at the University of Southern Maine. "James, I have something that might interest you," she said, her voice showing the excitement she always felt when finding a potential historical mystery. "It's a 1914 family portrait, but there's something the mother is hiding in her hand, something she clearly didn't want others to see yet couldn't bear to let go of completely." "Send me the images," James replied immediately. 1914 was a major year. Families were dealing with everything from money problems to the coming war. Whatever she was hiding might tell us an amazing story. Dr. James Reed examined the high-resolution images Sarah had sent. His historian's mind immediately recognized the potential importance of the hidden object. The formal nature of studio portraits in 1914 meant that every detail was carefully controlled. Nothing appeared by accident. "The Hartwell Studios mark is our first real clue," James explained to Sarah during their meeting at the university. Vidor Hartwell ran one of Boston's most exclusive photography studios from 1895 to 1925. His client records, if they still exist, might help us identify this family. James had spent the morning making calls to various Boston historical societies and archives. The Massachusetts Historical Society confirmed they had acquired Hartwell's business records in 1967, including appointment books and client information. "We are driving to Boston tomorrow," Sarah announced. This mystery won't solve itself. The next morning, Sarah found herself in the climate-controlled archives of the Massachusetts Historical Society. The Hartwell Studios collection filled 3 large boxes containing appointment ledgers, client letters, and photographic plates. She began with the 1914 appointment book. Scanning through months of entries, under March 15, 1914, she found it, Patterson Family Portrait, 2 p.m. premium sitting. The entry included an address, 145 Beacon Street, Boston. The premium sitting note suggested this was a wealthy family who could afford Hartwell's most expensive services. Sarah's hands shook a little as she photographed the entry. The next step would be researching the Patterson family at that address, but she sensed she was close to uncovering something significant. A librarian approached her table. "Finding what you're looking for?" "I think so," Sarah replied. "Now I need to find out who the Pattersons were and what a mother might have felt compelled to hide in her hand during what should have been a happy family portrait." The weight of the mystery pressed upon her as she got ready to look deeper into the Patterson family history. The Boston Public Library's genealogy department became Sarah's next stop. Armed with the address from Hartwell's records, she started piecing together the Patterson family story through city directories, census records, and newspaper archives. The 1910 census showed the family's makeup. Thomas Patterson, age 42, listed as a textile merchant. His wife Eleanor, age 36, son William, and daughter Catherine, age 5. The family employed 2 servants, showing great wealth during Boston's textile boom. Thomas Patterson owned Patterson and Associates, a successful textile importing business with connections to mills throughout New England. The company specialized in fine fabrics from European manufacturers, making the Pattersons prominent members of Boston's merchant class. But as Sarah dug deeper into 1914 newspaper archives, she found worrying information. The Boston Globe from February 1914 contained a small business section noted, "Patterson and Associates faces difficulties in changing European trade conditions." More concerning was an item from the Boston Herald dated March 10, 1914, just 5 days before the family portrait. Local textile merchant T. Thomas Patterson questioned by federal investigators regarding suspected irregularities in import documentation. Sarah's heart raced. The family had sat for their expensive portrait were under federal investigation. This context gave new meaning to Eleanor Patterson's hidden object. What did she hide in her hand during what might have been their final family portrait as a wealthy Boston family? The reference librarian, noticing Sarah's intense focus, approached her table. "Are you researching the Patterson textile scandal?" she asked quietly. Sarah looked up, surprised. "You know about it? It's a fascinating case study," the librarian replied. Thomas Patterson was eventually convicted of customs fraud in 1915. The family lost everything: their home, their business, their social standing. Eleanor Patterson, she paused dramatically. She disappeared shortly after the trial. Some say she fled to Canada with the children. Others believe something more tragic happened. Sarah felt a chill. Whatever Eleanor Patterson had hidden in her hand during that March 1940 portrait suddenly seemed far more important than a simple family keepsake. Sarah's research took her to the National Archives branch in Boston, where federal court records from 1914 to 1915 were kept. The Patterson case file was surprisingly thick, containing investigation reports, witness statements, and evidence documentation. The case against Thomas Patterson revealed a complex web of customs fraud spanning 3 years. He had been systematically underreporting the value of imported textiles, avoiding thousands of dollars in federal taxes. The scheme involved false documentation and bribery of port officials. But as Sarah read deeper into the investigative reports, she found something unexpected. Federal agents had suspected Eleanor Patterson of being more than an innocent bystander. A Treasury Department memorandum dated March 8, 1914 stated, "Evidence suggests Miss Eleanor Patterson kept separate financial records and letters related to the import scheme. Recommend immediate search of family residence." The search had been planned for March 16, 1914, one day after the family portrait. Sarah's pulse quickened as she realized the timing. Eleanor Patterson had known federal agents were coming to search their home. The family portrait on March 15th wasn't just a formal family photograph. It was taken on the last day of their life as they knew it. In the evidence inventory from the March 16th search, Sarah found a crucial detail: searched premises thoroughly. No additional documentation recovered. Subject may have destroyed or hidden relevant materials before search. The picture was becoming clearer. Eleanor Patterson had hidden something in her hand during the portrait, possibly evidence she could not bear to destroy, but dared not leave in the house. The photograph itself might have been her way of saving proof of whatever she was protecting. The folder marked unrecovered evidence. To Mr. Patterson's arrest, Eleanor came to collect Catherine from school. She seemed very upset and kept saying, "I have to protect what matters most." That was the last time anyone at the school saw either mother or daughter. Sarah's research into Eleanor's disappearance revealed that she and the children had simply vanished in April 1915, shortly after Thomas's conviction. Police reports indicated they had left their Beacon Street home with only personal belongings, leaving no forwarding address. William Patterson, the 8-year-old son, had been enrolled briefly in a school in Burlington, Vermont, in May 1915, but records show the family left there after only 2 weeks. After that, the trail went completely cold. The Boston Police Department had conducted a missing persons investigation, but they concluded that Eleanor had likely fled to avoid the shame and potential charges of her own. No evidence of foul play was found. As Sarah read the final police report, dated December 1915, one line stood out: "Mrs. Patterson's disappearance appears voluntary." However, her knowledge of her husband's criminal activities and possible possession of undiscovered evidence makes her a person of continued interest to federal authorities. Whatever Eleanor Patterson had hidden in her hand that day in 1914, it had been important enough to risk everything to protect. Sarah's breakthrough came from a surprising source. While researching Eleanor Patterson's disappearance, she had posted questions on several genealogy websites. 3 days after her Boston Archives visit, she received an email from a woman named Ruth Caldwell in Burlington, Vermont. "I believe my grandmother may have been Catherine Patterson. Well, she always claimed her real name was Catherine, but she went by Carol Caldwell her entire adult life. She died in 1995, but she left behind some items that might interest you, including what she called her mother's secret." Sarah immediately called Ruth, her hands shaking as she dialed. Ruth was a retired teacher in her 72nd, the granddaughter of the little girl from the 1914 photograph. Grandmother rarely spoke about her early childhood, Ruth explained during their phone conversation. She said her father had been involved in some kind of trouble, and that her mother had saved important papers. She kept a small metal box her entire life, claiming it contained proof of the truth. Ruth agreed to meet Sarah the following day in Burlington. That evening, Sarah could hardly sleep, wondering what Eleanor Patterson's secret might reveal after more than 100 years. The next morning, in Ruth's cozy Burlington home, Sarah finally saw Catherine Patterson's legacy. The metal box was small, about the size of a jewelry box, with initials EP engraved on the lid, Eleanor Patterson. Inside, carefully wrapped in oiled cloth, were several items: a letter addressed to Catherine, a small photograph, and 3 folded documents that looked like official papers. "ND Mother made me promise to keep these safe," Ruth said softly. She said someday someone would come looking for the truth about what really happened to her family. She always maintained that her mother was innocent and that her father had been protecting someone else. Sarah's hands trembled as she carefully unfolded the letter Eleanor had written to her daughter. The handwriting was elegant but hurried, and the date was March 15, 1914. The same day as the family portrait. "My dearest Catherine," the letter began, "if you are reading this, then the truth has finally come to light." With Ruth's permission, Sarah carefully read Eleanor Patterson's letter aloud, both women hanging on every word. "From the past, my dearest Catherine, if you are reading this, then the truth has finally come to light. Your father is not the criminal the government believes him to be. The real perpetrator of the customs fraud is his business partner, Jonathan Herrick, who has been using your father's name and forging his signature on documents for years. I have proof of Jonathan's guilt letters between him and corrupt port officials, forged copies of your father's signature, and financial records showing payments made from accounts your father never knew existed. Jonathan threatened our family when your father started asking questions about differences in the business. He said if we exposed him, he would ensure your father was convicted of crimes that could result in prison or even deportation. Today, we sat for what may be our final family portrait. Hidden in my hand was the key to a safety deposit box at the First National Bank of Boston. Box number 247. Inside that box is all the evidence needed to prove your father's innocence and Jonathan's guilt. I could not risk keeping these documents in our home, knowing federal agents would search it. "If something happens to your father and me, you must get this evidence when you are old enough. The bank manager, Mr. Charles Whitman, is a family friend who knows the truth. He will help you when the time comes. Your father chose to protect our family's safety rather than fight charges he knew were false. He believed that by accepting blame, he could keep us all safe from Jonathan's threats. But I cannot let an innocent man's reputation be destroyed forever. Remember, my darling Catherine, that courage sometimes means protecting the truth until the right moment comes to reveal it. Your father is a good man who made a terrible choice out of love for our family." Sarah felt tears in her eyes as she finished reading. The hidden key in Eleanor's hand hadn't been evidence of guilt, it was proof of innocence, carefully preserved through more than a century. Ruth wiped her eyes. Grandmother always said her mother was brave. She kept this letter her entire life, waiting for someone who would care enough to uncover the truth. The next morning, Sarah and Ruth drove to Boston together, the metal box and Eleanor's letter carefully secured in Sarah's briefcase. The First National Bank of Boston had been bought by a larger institution in the 1960s, but corporate records showed that safety deposit boxes from the original bank had been moved to the main branch downtown. Bank manager Jennifer Walsh listened closely as Sarah explained the historical importance of their request. While safety deposit box 247 had been sealed for over a century due to unpaid fees, the bank's legal department confirmed that Catherine Patterson's daughter, as Eleanor's closest living relative, had the right to access its contents. "This is highly unusual," Walsh admitted, "but given the historical nature and the proper documentation, we can proceed." In the bank's vault, safety deposit box 247 sat in a row of similarly abandoned boxes. When Walsh inserted the key Eleanor had hidden in her hand that day in 1914, it turned smoothly, as if it had been waiting for this moment. Inside the box were the documents Eleanor had described, detailed letters between Jonathan Herrick and corrupt port officials, bank records showing bribes, and most damning of all, practice sheets where Herrick had perfected forging Thomas Patterson's signature. There was also a letter from Herrick to Eleanor dated March 5, 1914, that made the threat clear: "If your husband continues asking questions about the import documents, I will ensure he takes responsibility for problems he knows nothing about. Your family's reputation and safety depend on his cooperation." Ruth held one of the documents. Her grandmother's vindication, finally complete. Isha had been right all along. Her mother truly had been protecting the truth. Sarah carefully photographed every document, her mind already racing with ideas on how to reveal this historical discovery to the world. Thomas Patterson had been innocent, taking the blame to shield his family from the threats of a dangerous man. Eleanor Patterson had not been an accomplice at all. She had been a mother, trying to save proof of her husband's innocence for future generations. Inside the safety depot sit box was one final item, another photograph showing Thomas Patterson and Jonathan Herrick together at the textile business. Both men were smiling and shaking hands, a bitter irony considering the betrayal that came just 6 months later. After Herrick discovered Eleanor Patterson's secret, Sarah later stood before a packed auditorium at the Massachusetts Historical Society, presenting her findings to historians, genealogists, and members of the Patterson family who had come forward after news of the discovery spread. The materials from safety deposit box 247 had been examined by forensic document experts, who confirmed the papers were genuine and the signatures had been forged. The story captured national attention and became a powerful example of how historical wrongs could still be corrected. Through careful preservation and determined research, Thomas Patterson's conviction was officially recognized as a miscarriage of justice by the federal court system. While a formal exoneration was impossible due to the passage of time, what mattered most was that the Patterson family name had finally been cleared in the historical record. Ruth Caldwell donated Eleanor's letter and the full contents of the safety deposit box to the Massachusetts Historical Society, ensuring that future researchers would have access to this remarkable story of courage and truth. Dr. James Reed traced the fate of Jonathan Herrick and discovered that he had fled to South America in 1916, a short lie after Thomas Patterson's conviction. This finding strongly supported Eleanor's account of what had happened. As Sarah concluded her presentation, she displayed the original 1914 photograph alongside Eleanor's letter. She reminded the audience that photographs are more than simple images. They are frozen moments, holding stories that wait quietly to be uncovered. Eleanor Patterson's hidden key was not just a secret. It was a mother's determination to protect the truth for a future generation. Ruth Caldwell smiled through tears. finally seeing her grandmother's lifelong faith in her mother's story proven true. The little girl in the 1914 photograph had grown up carrying her mother's secret. Now, more than a century later, that secret had restored her family's honor. The 1914 studio photograph, once just a portrait of a well-off Boston family, had become a symbol of a mother's love, the power of preserving truth, and the reminder that sometimes the most important secrets are hidden in plain sight, waiting for the right moment to change history itself. Elenina Patterson's courage in hiding that key in her hand during their final family portrait ultimately achieved exactly what she had hoped.